Hi, it's Hans at ahappierman.com. Today's topic is what to do if you're a verbally abused man. Man, being a verbally abused man really is a terrible situation, and I feel for the guys who go through this because I went through it. I went through it for years. I suffered and struggled and lived in chaos and misery for a long, long time. And on my ahappierman.com website, I've got a variety of resources talking about the verbal abuse of men. There's a click on the verbal abuse of men tab at the top. Got a bunch of articles on verbal abuse. And of course, I got my book, Leave Your Wife and Become a Happier Man with the 3-Step System, available on the ahappierman.com website. And basically the reason I left my wife was her verbal abuse. Now, there were all kinds of other issues with the marriage, but I think all those other issues I probably could have personally gutted through and figured it out and made a halfway decent life for myself. But the verbal abuse was what ultimately drove me out the door, and it was the last straw. So what should you do if you're verbally abused, man? Well, I'm trying to help you. I've got those articles on the ahappierman.com website. I've got a bunch of videos on my YouTube channel. Now, I don't have them all categorized yet, so the verbal abuse ones are kind of scattered. I've got all kinds of videos and trying to help you. And the reason I don't go overboard making videos like this is because it's such a painful topic for me that I prefer to talk about other things. But I know that you guys who are suffering under verbal abuse need to hear this. There is a way out of your situation. The short story is you need to leave her. The verbal abuse isn't going to go away. Once a lady has chosen verbal abuse, she is just not going to, let's say, wake up one day and say, I've been verbal abusing my husband. I think I'm going to start being nice to him. My research when I was writing the book, I found that is not going to happen. Maybe some men, once they've been that are verbal abusers, can change. Some, not a lot, but some. But there seems to be very little evidence that women can change. It just becomes how she is, and there's going to be little hope for you having a good life if she's chosen verbal abuse. So that's first, is realizing that it's very, very unlikely that she's going to just get nice. And the other thing is, even if she gets nice today, in the back of your mind, you've suffered with this verbal abuse. She's been giving you a hard time. She's been calling you names. She's been doing everything that's just destroying your confidence and your quality of life. And that hurts you. And that's going to be hard for you to just forget about. And I would say you don't want to forget about it, because it's foolish to think that maybe she's nice for a week, but she's probably going to get not nice again at some point. So you're going to be always waiting for that next verbal abuse to happen. And it could, she could go a longer time frames between the verbal abuse. It could be, well, she only verbally abuses you once a week or once a month, or at Christmas time, or when she's stressed out, or at that time of her month, right? But the abuse is abuse, and verbal abuse should not be tolerated. It should just be walked away from. Because when I say tolerate, I don't mean when she verbally abuses you, you fly off the handle and return the venom in kind and start screaming and yelling at her. That is a recipe for a disastrous marriage, a disastrous relationship. You don't want that. The first thing, if you feel the need to scream at your wife, stifle it, grab your suitcase, fill it up with your gear, and get the heck out of there. That's what I should have done, but I just stifled it and took it and suffered mightily for it. And I don't want that for you. I don't want that in this darn world we live in. Kind of makes me sick to think about guys like me, guys like you, suffering like this and putting up with it and tolerating it. And I think we as a human race don't need it. We don't need it at all, but it's there. And on the short run, your only hope is to leave. And I hope and pray that you can find the strength. And I'm giving you what I can with these videos and my book and the articles, and there's other good videos on this. Not a lot. There's not a lot of good information. There's about this. It's a topic that people just want to stick their heads in the sand at, but it's out there. I see men out in public getting verbally abused by their wives, and I'm saddened and I'm sickened, and I wish that it wasn't happening, and I wish it wasn't happening in front of me. So you know, if a lady is giving a guy some verbal abuse in public, think about what's happening to that poor guy in private. And I know this is happening to you because it happened to me. The viciousness of her verbal attacks in private were, I don't know how I survived, to tell the truth. I haven't put up with anything like that in my life since, and life is so much better for it. I matter. You know, that's one of the things you want to put in your mind, is that you matter. Say to yourself, I matter a lot. I'm not going to put up with this verbal abuse. I'm going to leave, and I'm going to start recreating my life, and I'm going to do whatever it takes to have a good life. And you're going to have to be persistent. You're going to have to get quite a bit angry about it. You're going to have to hire an attorney to help you sort out this divorce process. And you're going to have to realize your life is going to be turned upside down when you leave your wife. It's going to be very, very, very difficult. But ultimately, you can prevail. You can become a happier man in charge of his life, having one heck of a great life. It's going to take you time. It's going to take you time, but you don't have to put up with the verbal abuse. You can leave. You can leave if your finances are totally in turmoil. You can leave if you have children. I have a video about that. Look for that one. Leaving your verbally abusive wife if you have children. And I talk about that in the book at great length. There's a few chapters about it. And the verbal abuse is not it's gonna ruin your life. The verbal abuse your wife lays on you, it's gonna ruin your children's lives too. The only hope they have is if you have the courage to leave, and then also the wherewithal to stay in the picture and be there for them when they need you. And you know, maybe your leaving will force your wife to at least be nice to her children, your precious children. Man, the topic is so difficult to talk about. It brings tears to my eyes thinking about you as a verbally abused man. It brings back the shock and hard feelings in me, and I'm trying to not have at this point in my life. So I just want you to know that there is a good life out there waiting for you if you can move away from this verbally abusive wife that you have. Now, I've got a lot of, let's say, there's some practical tips in the book how to organize yourself in the time frame from when you think you might leave to when you actually leave. You know, there's things you can do that I lay out in the book, simple financial things you can do, and there's things I lay out in the book, things you can do for, let's say, keeping track of the verbal abuse. I think the keeping track of the verbal abuse is a huge thing you can do, because what I found is the verbal abuse will happen. You'll suffer. You'll stoically try to get through it. She'll wear herself out. Things will go back to normal for a while. You'll try to forget about this horrible incident and hope that it was a one-off thing. And you'll forget about it, and then something will happen a day later, a week later, a month later, a year later, and the verbal abuse will pop up again. Well, you've stifled the memory. You've buried it. It's a traumatic experience that you've buried. Well, what I did, and what was recommended to me in a number of books I read, was to keep track of it in a private location. I had a planner book that I carried with me back and forth to work. I used it for work and personal means, and I kept a little hidden place in it where I was keeping track of these incidents, and then I could track it over time. And I tracked this for a couple of years. So prior to me learning about this, I was getting verbally abused, but I wasn't keeping track of it. I was just kind of hoping it would go away, and that is a foolish mistake. You should be keeping track of the critical things in your life. Everything in your life that's critical, you should be tracking. Your workouts, how much money you make, how much your investments, where you go, your appointments. You track all that. You have calendars. Well, do the same with the verbal abuse. This verbal abuse is deadly to your health. It's deadly to your happiness. You should be tracking it. If it happens once a year, maybe you can deal with it. If it happens once a month, I'm not sure you're going to be able to deal with it. If it happens more frequently, your life is just going to be a living hell, an absolute living hell if it's happening frequently. And I would argue if it happens once is too much. I think I have it in my book about the idea of the husband is loving, kind, a good lover, a good father, good provider to his wife. He comes home one day and beats the hell out of his wife. And somebody would say, well, he only did it once. Well, isn't once too much? In that case, isn't she totally entitled to never to leave that in that instant? The verbal abuse, well, it may not be as physically harmful as that. It's mentally as harmful. I would say once you get one chance at verbal abuse and you're gone. But for most of you, you've been absorbing this verbal abuse for a long time, and you've got to start with the idea of I matter. I'm going to track the most critical things in my life. How often she's abusing me. What did she say? I'm going to start making some plans for leaving. I'm going to get the numbers of the divorce attorneys. I'm going to figure out where I might live once I leave. I'm going to have a little bit of money. I'm going to have a change of clothes. There's a variety of things in the book, practical steps to make your leaving easier. And the other thing is, you may not have time to make any of these practical steps. You may have to leave today. You may have to leave after seeing this video. You may have to leave. You don't want to be a statistic. You don't want to snap. I know some guys will snap and they'll hurt their wives physically. They'll say things to their wives they shouldn't say. You loved her at one point. You don't love her anymore. She's been too hard on you. But you don't want to hurt her. You want to get out of there. And if you need more thoughts on this, go to my website, ahappierman.com. Look up the verbal abuse of men articles. They're prominent there. The book is prominent. They got a long article describing it. Take charge of your life. You don't have to be verbally abused anymore. All for now.